Hey you guys, welcome to class assignment number 8. It's our rectangle to round transition with an equal taper, which is another way of saying it's concentric from the round to the rectangle. So it's very similar to the squared round we did that was a true square to a round. It's just a little bit different. But the round is centered right over the rectangle here, so that's what kind of makes it an equal taper. It's going to be these dimensions, 12 by 7 rectangular, which could be drawn any way in AutoCAD. And you'll see when I bring up AutoCAD the way I chose to draw it. It's got a round diameter of 8 inches, and it has an elevation of 16 inches. So when we go over to AutoCAD with those dimensions, same stuff going on here. The way I chose to orient the rectangle is 12 inches in the Y direction and 7 inches in the X direction. So I drew in the top view, and then I placed an 8-inch round circle right sharing the same center as that rectangle. And then I kind of modified the drawing. When you do that, you'll notice that the circle is kind of wider than the narrowest side of the rectangle. So I just made some modifications and broke that line up to show these hidden lines kind of that I'm highlighting right here on the sides. That just shows me that the circle kind of like overhangs that narrow rectangle. And that just helps me kind of visualize that, seeing that the actual sides come out a little bit wider than the rectangle. So see a couple things here. I went ahead and divided the circle by 12 and numbered those similar to I did in the squared around, where I just started with 1 down here at kind of 6 o'clock and went counterclockwise back to 12 and then back to 1. So once I did that, I took those node points to the corners and I called my rectangle the same. I've got point A, B, C, and D. That stays the same. I even kept the same point halfway between point B and C. I called it point E down here. It kind of goes into that hidden view area there. And the only other thing I had to pick up there different is on the short side of the rectangle between A and B, I labeled the midpoint of that called F. And it's because, if you remember in the squared around, we kind of started our pattern kind of in the center of one of the square sides and kind of started with developing point E to point 4. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So I've got that one labeled. The difference is that was the same on the square all the way around. And when we're dealing with the rectangle around, I needed another one, because you can see here E to 4 is this far apart in the top view. And over here, F to 1 is this far apart. So I end up needing an additional point here of length and a true length that goes with that. And so I have to pick that up here. So where this is an equal taper, it means that the work that I do on kind of the long side of the rectangle will be the same on the right side and the left side. And the same thing with the short side of the rectangle. The work I do between point A and B and all up into here is the same as from D to C. So I'm going to need 2 patterns on this. And another point that I'm going to say is towards the end of the last pattern, I chose to I went ahead and instead of going and dividing my pattern right on one of the node points, I just kind of drew like an X between the A and C and D and B. And it kind of put a pattern development between kind of 5.5 and down here to like 11.5. That's kind of how that pattern, when I crossed it, it kind of exactly split between 2 nodes, and I developed my pattern that way. Well, with this one, if I draw this line, kind of planning on what I'm going to do in the very last here, is if I drew the same kind of cross line through here, what you would notice is that I'm not going to divide my pattern like that this time. I'm actually, because it gets so close to point 6, just a little bit off if I were to do that, I'm just going to develop point 6 and point 12. And so what I mean is, and then point 8, essentially I'm going to develop this kind of to the blue line. So if I now delete that, I'm just showing they're really close together. So what I did is on when I finished this, I developed the long side of the rectangle, and I kind of developed that all the way over to point 6 and all the way over here to point 2, and that becomes kind of like a third of the circle, but I kind of develop that all with the long side of the rectangle. And then I do 2 of those, and so I kind of have from point 12 to 8 and D to A to D, and I have from 6 to 2 and B to C. That's kind of that really equals like 2/3 of that whole circle, and 2 lengths of the rectangle. And then I'm going to finish it off by taking kind of the short side of the rectangle between A and B and up to point 1 and just develop it out to point 2 and point 12. So it's going to be kind of like a half of a third there. It's going to be a little short, little stubby pattern with a shorter rectangular side. And it'll be the same pattern up here that would be between D and C and point 7 over to 8 and 6. So I just divide my pattern a little bit differently. It really relates to how I drew that red line just a minute ago. It just shows that I can go right to the node points, kind of, is what I'm saying here, rather than go halfway in between node points when I develop my pattern. So once I essentially got that in, I took all those node points to their corresponding corners and labeled them. You'll notice I have all different colors here, and that's because the difference in this pattern is where like C to 4 and C to 7 were the same length in the last squared around drawing. They're not here, so they have different colors. Like that is picks up a shorter distance there than it does here from C to 4. Same way with like C to 5 and C to 6, where they were the same on the last drawing. They're not here. Like 5 and 6 back to point C each have real unique lengths, and so every node point really corresponds to a unique length within a quadrant of this circle, right? Like I'm talking like each one of these quadrants has different lengths to their nodes, but what I develop kind of in this C quadrant here is going to be the same that I would do in this B quadrant. And so, there's a number of ways I could divide my patterns, but essentially what it means is I'm going to be pulling those development circles down to the triangle to the right here in just a minute. I went ahead and then, used that. After I drew the top view, I use all that information to draw in the front view, and it has its corresponding elevation of 16 inches. So I pick up that. I've kind of marked how the points line up with each other, and this one should have point F right here. I should be looking straight out at point F, so I'm kind of missing that, but I do have it labeled up here in the top view. That's F. This would be F, top mid center in front of me. That probably should be there, but again, this line could probably be magenta colored because that would be, but I've kept it green just to kind of ghost in the very outside of that. So let's see. Now we're ready to draw the development circle. So the next thing I should have done, I just toggled that on. That was just used to draw I just use circles to draw in the overall widths across so I don't need that on right now. You can develop your front view however you want, just as long as you get the right information in there and it has the corresponding marks. So yeah, I go ahead and, I put in these circles off the top view. So what I've done is I've probably copied the elevation over to my right. So I've just copied that line first, and I've even copied that plus the word elevation over here and get this vertical line drawn in. Then I took and just draw a white line at any length to the right. So this one kind of builds my 90-degree angle so that I can do my Pythagorean theorem with all these true lengths. So I get those in first before I have all this other stuff, and then I come back here and I draw these circles in to pick up the first distances. So if you remember, the distances we needed were from E to 4 is the first distance I kind of need, that little short circle. And then along with that, E to 4 is going to be the same as the no name point here over to 10. So it's kind of developing that half of that left half over here too. And then the same thing down here. I'm going to pull this kind of greenish colored, like camo green colored circle here is actually F is center pulling to point 1 here. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that is really close, but the actual one that intersects point 1, F to point 1. So I take those two circles down kind of first. Those end up being kind of the start of my patterns, is what I kind of view that, just the same way. I only need one of those in the last drawing we did. Like that initial E to 4 picked up all 4 sides. This one only picks up half the pattern, and then F to 1 picks up the other half of the pattern on the short side of the rectangle. So I take both of those down to the development circle and kind of label them. That's the E line, the yellow one, and the F one is the F line is this military green color. So I get those two down there kind of first, and then I've labeled these out as I've picked them up. So if I go back to my top view, I just kind of step these back, and these ones all intersect from point B. So because B to any of these is the same as it would be from any of these quadrants, so I just use point B as center, and I grab from B to 4, which is the magenta colored line. It intersects there. B is center. I copy that down to the line and label it, down to the triangle and label it. And then I pick up B to point 3, which is the one you got to be real careful. There's a lot going on in here. That's B to 3 right there where that node point is. Really close to where just the rectangle line passes through the circular line. You'll see that. You should have a lot of stuff going on in this dimension. Just watch it there. But this light blue colored node line here doesn't exactly line up with the outside edge of the rectangle. I'm specifically pulling that length up to the round, right? So from B up to that point on the round is 0.3. So take that circle down to the development triangle. Then I'm going to pull B to 0.2 as a dark blue line, dark blue, and then I pull B to 0.1. And these two get really close. The light blue and the salmon colored lines here are really close to the same length, but that's actually B to 0.1, and I'm picking up with that salmon color. So with those, that essentially takes that I'm pulling like 6 circles down there. So I've got each of the node points, 0.4 to 3, 2, 1, that's 4 points, plus the little E to 4 development circle and the F to 1 development circle. I take those six lengths down to and where they intersect the white line establishes the point, and then I take it back up to the reference elevation of 16 inches to get the true length of all these right here. And then now that I've got those, I can then take a new development circle with that as kind of the radius, right? That's where all these other circles end up, is they're using this point as center and pulling it out to all their corresponding little points on that white line. So I come up with these 6 like true length circles, and then we're going to use those to start the pattern. I'll just start with the pattern that would be from B to C with E as center, and then what it's going to do is it's going to go from B to C with E as center up to 4, and then we're going to walk this pattern from 4 to 5 to 6, and from 4, 3 to 2, and that's where we're going to end the pattern, right at those node points, which is almost a little bit easier than the square that we did before. We're not splitting the pattern. We're just taking it right to the actual node points because they're so close to the corners anyway. So that should be what I do next as I come out here with these next 2 steps. Up here in space anywhere, I draw in my 12-inch long line that represents B to C with E as center. I take its development circle down here that references E, and I snap that yellow line to get that yellow circle to get the overall height, and I labeled it 0.4. And then from there, I just go ahead and snap the magenta colored lines are the next ones. So I'll reference the top view to see that, but they just go from B to 4 and C to 4. So I always, whenever I'm like wondering what's the next set of whatever I need to pick up, I reference the top view here. Because if I came over here and I decided that I just drawn in, let me kind of zoom in here and get this over where I want it here, kind of in the center of the screen. If I just took and drew a line from B to C with E as center, and I have the true length up to 4 over there now. If I just look at here, the next set of lines kind of coming towards 0.2 and 0.6 are going to be the magenta lines. They're the next ones I need, which they both go to 0.4. I just need to pull a line from C and B up to 0.4, and that length should be the true length because I've used E to 4 to really find that true length. They should be the same height, and I can kind of prove that they are without even pulling the magenta colored circle over here, which you can see I didn't even do that. If I go to my next step, I think I go right to the blue ones, yeah, but It's because these ones just kind of fall in place once I've located E to 4. So I'll just show you, like if I took a dimension line here, and just by the nature of the triangle here, I pull that this point is 17.0953 inches long. And you can see I didn't even like pull that magenta colored circle over there. So let's just check to see what its radius is. It's going to be from that line up to the point here. And it shows that I'm like really close, right? So it's just because the way I started that pattern from E to 4 really locked in that height, and these just kind of follow suit because they intersect the same point. So I don't even have to pull those over. I just draw those in. B to 4 and C to 4. Bam, draw them in. Now what I'm looking for now is I can go ahead and turn off my yellow one. I only needed that to get that yellow line in. And let's do the next one, which should be, I'm going to bring over my light blue lines, because once I've got that's what I'm going to look like over here in the top view again. Once I've got my magenta colored lines in, the next set of lines out that I'm looking for are the light blue lines. That's 0.5, and down here 0.3. Same distance from C to 5 as it is from B to 3. Those are the same distance. So I pull two of those light blue circles over here using C and B as center and snap those on. This one right here is the circle that has C as center, and this lower circle is the one that has B as center. And then what I need is this orange line's appeared, and that's because I needed the distance from 4 to 5 and from 4 to 3. And so I go back to my top view, and that line, that should show up here somewhere right there. So that's this orange circle is the last one I've drawn while I'm starting to do the pattern. It is just picking up a radius from 4 to 5 here, so, and which is the same between all those points. You know, that's referencing those 12 divisions that we chose to divide. And so using 4 as center, I pulled that distance over to 5, which makes it the same. It's intersecting 0.3 too here, so that orange circle is intersecting the same point here. So that just allows me to use one circle to lock in both those points where they hit the light blue lines, and I come over here and do that. So that's what I just shown, is I've used that circle where they intersect the light blue and the orange, establishes 0.5 and 3, and then I just drew a line back from that, the same light blue color, back to C and back to B. And with that being done, I can snap that off and reference what's the next set of lines. Now that I've got my light blue in, I go to my dark blue, which is kind of going to be the end of my pattern. This should be the last spacing I have to pick up. So I go pick up the dark blue circle down here, copy it from its center point, and drop it on point B and C. So this one uses C as center, and this one right here uses B as center. And then grab another orange circle and use 0.5 and 3 as center, and that they establish these points right here where they intersect. That's points 2 right there. And up here is going to be 0.6 and the end of our pattern. So that should be what I turn on here is, yep, I drew that in, and then I took that point back to C, and I use that as red. It could be dark blue, but I just use it as red because I understood that it was the end of my pattern. That is a polyline. So if I turn off the reference material here, I end up kind of finishing with that pattern, and I think I pulled it out over here. Yep. This is I just copied that out of its reference material, and doesn't have any named points, but that essentially is kind of like a third of the circle. It's got like 1, 2, 3, 4 node points in there, and just on one long side of the rectangle. So it kind of picks up a third of the circle with one side of our rectangle, the long side, and we would use 2 of those for the 2 long sides of the rectangle, and all we need now is the short side of the rectangle with what's left of the circle. So that's going to be back over here, and I'm going to go ahead and like turn off whatever one it was that had all those circles. There we go. I'm going to clean that up a little bit, because the next one I need is kind of thinking from A to B as its own little independent pattern with F as center. I go ahead and draw that, and I use that development circle that was like that, military green color from F to 1 that's over here. That one is the true length from F to point 1. And I come over here to some space away. I've got a line drawn 7 inches long that's from point A to B with F as center, and grab that circle from this group that matches that color and snap it on here, which it probably should show that. Right here. No, not right there. Not right there. We're actually down past that. It should be this one. Yeah. I just grabbed that, my big reference line circle, to establish point 1, same way I did my other pattern, just kind of starting from the center of the pattern out. And then once I have that point 1 established using this line, this true length, I can just pull A and B up, and I'll do the same thing that I did on that last pattern. I drew those as a salmon colored, because that's the next set of lines out. I'll show you. I'm just going to pull this length real quick. That's 16.5 inches. Yeah, what I do is now I'm looking at the top view here, and we just did F to point 1, its true length, across from B to, or A to B. And if I look here, the next set of lines out are these salmon colored lines. So all I need to do is take points A and B back up to point 1, should be, without even pulling the salmon colored circle from this group, should be the true length. And I just pull that dimension as 16.5 inches. So let me just check this salmon colored line here. I know it's really close to the length of that light blue line, but it's right there. And it intersects the same points up here. So I'm just pulling it out here just to kind of get a reference dimension here. Yep, it's 16.5 inches. So I didn't even use that. I just used point F to 1 to establish the overall length of that. Take that pattern to that same point, and it kind of locks that in. And so now all I need to do is back to my front view, top view, and reference what the next set of lines I'm looking to pick up is these dark blue lines. After the salmon lines, the next ones are dark blue, and that's the end of my pattern. That's where I ended the last pattern. And this one will put the weld seam kind of as dark blue lines here. So I just need to go from 1 to 12 and 1 to 2. So I use that same orange circle here because it's same spacing. So from back to this one here, I can snap off that one and snap on the next one. Is blue circles, so they were the same ones I used in the upper pattern. Same blue circle. I grab that here, and using B as center, I snap that one, and then using A as center, I snap that one, and then grab my orange circle with 1 as center and dropped it on there, and now it has these points of intersection right here, which are points 12 and point 2 right here. So you see me draw that in and end my pattern, because that's where that pattern ends. That's all I needed for that. So I'm going to turn this one off, and that is it. That's the end of pattern. So at that point, I've only picked up like one, a development. This is from 1 to 12 and 1 to 2, which matches up with my upper pattern. If I multiply that by 2, this whole pattern that I've pulled over to the side here, it ends up being the short side rectangular pattern. And essentially all these little segments, I should have 12 of those going around if I have 2 patterns, because I have 4 of them over here. That would be 8. Yeah, because I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4 times 2 is 8. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 if I times this pattern by 2. So I've picked up all 12 points and just kind of have 2 separate patterns. So, and that's what I've done over here, is I've just pulled out, these are the things that I would need. These are the parts I would need to make this. 2 of these patterns, 2 of these patterns. I think I've even referenced the length to show you that even though I developed these independently, this weld seam is 16.269 inches long. This weld seam is 16.269 inches long, and I'd have weld seams in all 4 corners. I could actually choose to copy and paste those together, from center line out. I could make this a full half pattern like I did in the last video. I'll just stop it right there, because this is kind of be how I'd want to hold this, especially if it was big and heavy in the press brake. So, but you can always modify these patterns to fit your needs. So that's the end of this. From here on, the next video we'll go into cones. So we'll see you then. Yeah, this finishes class assignment 8.